Thank you all for staying. Have you all had your coffee? Ready to go? That was a great last session. Thank you to everyone who was there, and Palmer and everyone on the panel. It was really great. I am honored to be here. Thank you, Sonia Haskins, for an amazing programming slate of diverse topics, of diverse panelists. And today, I have the honor of sitting with this group of innovators. It's pretty amazing. I normally am very prepared for these panels to moderate, but I will tell you, we've been chatting, and I'm throwing the script out the door. We're just going to talk. I want this group to be conversational. I want us to interrupt each other and add to things and not just go down the row with questions. And so what I ask of all of you who are in the audience is to be able to grasp something so that when you leave this room, you have a new lens to look through as you're looking at mixed reality, which is going to be the loose topic for the day. And we're going to do a lot of questions at the end. So I want to make sure that you start thinking about some of the cool things they're going to say and be ready for some questions. With that, I'll introduce myself. My name is Jenna Seiden, as our lovely MC introduced me as. I oversee the business side of things at Skydance Games. That's publishing, that's licensing, that's transmedia, partnerships, you name it. I've been in VR, I've been in games since I was a little kid. My dad owned an arcade, so it was a great place to start. That might be a little early for some people, but I was at Xbox. I've done a lot in console, but I joined this industry at HTC, and it's been a reunion to see some wonderful friends who are still there, people who've moved on. I was acquired by Meta. I was part of Beat Games, and now I get to make zombie games at Skydance, which is wonderful. So like I said, we're going to talk about mixed reality today, but loosely, again, because it's really important to hear from the platform, from developers, all of their unique backgrounds and the considerations that you need to think about if you're making games, you're making applications, you're doing enterprise experiences. Are you an agency? Are you just passionate about technology? We're going to touch upon all of those things and just riff. That's the plan. All right, so if you wouldn't mind, let's start a little traditionally. I would love for you to introduce yourselves, the role you play at your organization, but take a minute to also give everybody, let's level set from what perspective, what soapbox is everybody standing on, so that as we get into the questions, we know a little bit more about you. So I'm going to start with Tommy, all the way in from Sweden.
All right. Hi, my name is Tommy Palm. I'm the founder and CEO of Resolution Games. We are focused on making games for VR and AR, and been doing that for about 10 years. We have, I think, almost 17 games out. So we've been really enjoying working with VR, and now we feel super excited that AR is basically where virtual reality was back in 2015 that Palmer was talking about.
Well, hello, everybody. I'm Rita Turkowski. I work for Meta, and since 2018, I've been managing the Oculus Start program at Meta, where we are helping indie game developers find success on our platform. My passion and our goal is to help developers find a voice within Meta, to get some attention, to get support, to get hardware benefits, and encourage them to build and build and build. Whether they're building their first app or their 10th app, we want to support them on the platform and hope to make them as successful as they can. And my current passion right now with MR and mixed reality is giving developers an opportunity to reach new audiences that they may not have been able to reach with VR before. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Robin Moulder, and I'm the CEO of 3 Pound Games and 3 Pound XR. We're innovating on the cutting edge, really seriously cutting edge on the game side. And then we're also working in 3 Pound XR to provide these tools that we innovate with to industry, hospitality, medical, like give them the ability to do the cool stuff that we can all do up here.
All right, yeah. And now, hi, I'm Jesse Schell. I've been in the XR space for about 30 years now. Used to work at Disney. I also teach at Carnegie Mellon, but run a studio called Schell Games, where we've shipped, I don't know, a couple dozen different XR apps over the years, and lately doing more and more mixed reality stuff.
All right. Pretty impressive backgrounds. The last panel was about hardware. We're going to stay a little bit away from hardware because there's a lot of challenges and things that we shouldn't be speaking about here. But we're going to talk about software. We're going to talk about content and creation. So I'm going to put Rita, I think I'm going to choose you first.
For
gonna ask you a question. I'm gonna start as if I were in the audience and I was asking a question. So I'm a developer, and ironically, for all the VR titles that I've been part of with Baobab and Felix and Paul, and I got to work with Tommy at Resolution and Beat Games, I personally haven't done mixed reality.
Right.
So if I stopped you in the hallway or asked you in the question here, why MR? Why should I start thinking about mixed reality if I come to you versus VR?
I think it's a great question. And surprisingly, we didn't rehearse this
No, we
too
did
much.
not.
We actually riffed
All
on this
unscripted. All
this
unscripted.
morning. MR gives you an opportunity to look at problems in a different way. Ask yourself this question: who are you designing for? Who are you creating for? And how are they going to use your application? And if you find that that application is best done in a fully immersive, open kind of environment, VR may be perfect for you. Or maybe VR isn't right for you at all because you can probably do like a 2D or a mobile game or whatever. But if you're looking at spatial and getting into spatial and what you want to build or you've been tasked to build, because say you're an agency and you've got to build for a customer, if that works well, and I'm looking at a confined space right here, if you can take advantage of that space, and Jesse, I'm going to toss this to you because you said the other day, that's here. If you're working here, and this is the environment, and you can take advantage of the constraints that both the hardware and the environment gives you, then that could be just the thing that is extremely compelling to a user who may never have experienced spatial computing at all, at any level. And you brought up something about it being there, being for like anywhere you can be in VR, fully immersive.
Yeah, that's definitely the distinction that I tend to draw. Because a lot of people look at like, oh, VR, MR, XR, it's all the same, and some of it's the same, but a lot of it's not, right? Because with VR, it's all about being immersed in an environment that is not where you are.
Right.
So like you're going to be there. It's going to be this distant environment, and that can be really cool. It's part of what's so exciting about VR, but at the same time, for a lot of people, it's very intimidating. The idea that my body is not going to be in this place anymore, but somewhere else, and like it's too much for some people.
It's unnerving. Whereas
Right.
in MR, you basically know where you are.
Yes.
You see your hands. If
That's
you're
it.
using hands, your Rocket game's a good example of that. You're actually experiencing who you are there.
Yeah.
Right there in
So-
that space. confined
Right, and so
space.
yeah, when you have applications that are better done here, in this place, in this space, with the people around me, with the furniture around me, and then be able to augment that with virtual items, like that's when MR really shines. Those are where the real opportunities are.
Especially if you have an app, particularly a game that might be table-based. Or like I
Could
was
be.
working with one app about a year ago that's a pool-playing app. And this pool-playing app, it's the third iteration of it. And in VR, you had to do all these things just to onboard into the game. You had to enter the space. You had to put your name on a board saying that you will go up next and playing. And it was wonderful, but it was kind of heavy. And you had to really understand that you had to be in VR. Whereas the MR version was, you just go in the room and you pick a table in your home, and then it sets up the pool table for you right there. And you can play, whether it's co-located
Well,
or
it
regular
decreases
multiplayer.
that
It was
friction.
fun.
That's
right. You jump right into your own
We've
living
got
room.
so much friction, and it's
Yeah.
like put this headset on, and immediately zoom, you're in this completely immersive, simulated world. MR. One of the themes in a lot of the panels that I've been sitting in on is connection, and it's connection to literally what you just said, furniture
said
and
that
the
before.
objects in your room. It's connection to other people, and I feel MR decreases that friction and allows you to, maybe do things differently that you wouldn't be able to do and get people into the experience faster. I mean, and what I also loved is something we talked about was, you see people get in a headset, you've seen them play Beat Saber, and they're a little nervous to move around.
Right.
But they have confidence in their movement in mixed reality. Is that something that you have found?
Oh yeah, I mean, for people, if you have not tried some of the mixed reality apps and spent time in there, one of the things that blew me away is how quickly you can get used to, I'm going to put on a headset, and I'm going to get up, and I'm going to run all around, and I'm going to feel totally safe doing that. It's completely counterintuitive. You would not think that in blindfolding myself with this, you could run around your house, but you pick it at like 10 seconds. People are totally comfortable doing that. And so that ability to be able to do things in your real space and place, you want to make a cooking game, why wouldn't you do it on your real kitchen
Right.
counter. Like, why wouldn't you do that, right? I mean, Robin, I know you've been can you talk some about some of the mixed reality stuff you've been doing? Because you've been doing some really interesting experiments with multiplayer gaming in that space.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we're working on a game called Grocket, and this is really, truly the cutting edge. Everything Rita throws at us, we eat it up and we stick it in the app. So multiplayer with physics. We're merging the rooms together. We do it from the sides because we wanted people to be able to be close to each other. So as the rooms are pulled together, we get to use the whole space like that. And we use all the scene understanding. So if I shoot a fire demon from my room into your room, it hits your table. We both see, feel it, everything at the same time. It feels very connected. And now what we're showing today at AWE is co-location, which just takes it to a whole new level. The immersion is so deep. Now you're playing dress up. Now you're actually just like having fun and just having a good time and running around. I could see people just sitting there playing with the avatar creator forever because they've all wanted to do this. We all have these moments where we start to play. Like you see the kids that are like 12 and then they're in a doctor's office and they have these old school like, what do you call those things? A toy, like little, it's like a little
wire track.
maze toy,
Yeah.
wire track, right? It's very rudimentary and it's generally designed for a much, much younger age. But sometimes people like to regress because it's easy and it's fun and relaxing. And right now, VR is a load. It's a head load on you. You're covering your face. That makes you feel uncomfortable. People don't like their head being covered. That's why they don't like going underwater for the first time. So this is just very freeing. And now they're like, wait, I can just have fun in this environment. It's incredible.
I was just going to say, speaking of going underwater, there's a level in Grocket where you are in water. And what you probably didn't mention, how much fun it is and how freeing to feel like you're in your room, but there's the water. And in your game, just grabbing things and moving things around, and everything, it's just a blast because you feel like you have so much freedom in your own room, and you don't feel that sense of being suffocated a little bit by being fully immersed in an unusual or strange world where maybe you're not very comfortable. So MR provides so much more accessibility. And I was thinking about Demio in MR.
Yeah, well, down on the show floor, I don't know if you saw this Game Night. I really recommend check it out. As you could see, people immediately having so much fun with this co-located, just basically toy box, but in mixed reality, so you still see your friend and the people around you. It's really, really impressive.
I'm a little intimidated, though. You just said that, like, oh, we just put whatever meta throws at us, we sort of throw in. And the magic is that the people, the players, the consumers, they don't know how much work goes into it. But that's a lot, and you're building.
And that's where the magic is, though,
totally.
right? So that is one of those things. When you start doing VR development, you tend to get, we've all done it. We've all built really complicated games, and people get in there. VR takes you someplace else. Now you're like, what am I doing? What's going on? There's a whole new set of rules in this world. Well, we're not doing that anymore. If I'm saying, well, you're you. It's all about you. We're bringing the game to you in your house.
We're meeting them where they are.
You're comfortable. Yep. You're like, oh, I could do that. I can handle this. And that makes it the ultimate onboarding tool. And, hand tracking helps so much. No more of that grab it. The T-Rex thing, that's what we call it. We call it the T-Rex.
Right.
Yeah, so afraid that I'm going to hit somebody. I'm not afraid anymore.
Well, Tommy, you have such a portfolio of titles. And I thought when MR came out, oh, look at the portfolio that Resolution did. He just went back in and retrofitted and made MR modes and stuff, and that's actually not the case. I thought, oh, Angry Birds. I forgot Angry Birds was on Magic Leap. Is that correct?
Yep.
So that sort of started off as AR, right? And then when you think about like Racket Club, is that like I'm so much more comfortable playing that in the MR mode because I know I'm not going to do what I did with the Wii, and hit things and do that. So, what was your methodology, if you will, going back to your portfolio, because you said that you actually thought about making those modes even before sort of MR became sort of a more common topic. And where are you going in terms of building natively? All of you are building like native apps for MR versus but adding modes to it. Can you speak to how you went back to the portfolio?
Yeah, sure. So we founded Resolution around the fact that we thought that AR was going to kind of eat the world and be really big eventually. And virtual reality was going to be there first. So we took a big look at what we wanted to do and felt accessible games were important to us. First time people play was something that we were after, and not making people nauseous. So more stationary experience. And that also leans really well into augmented reality when you're not like physically zooming around. So therefore, a lot of our portfolio works really well for both virtual reality and augmented reality. And it is helpful today to have, like, the audience is getting to that inflection point that Jesse is often talking about, like 10 million people there, big enough so you will have a friend in there, so it starts this word-of-mouth process. But concurrency is a huge problem for any game on any platform, right? You constantly have to think about how do you find somebody to play with at that moment when you want to play. And here in the US, it's good, a lot of headsets here. 70% of our players are here in the US. But in Australia and these other regions, it's much, much harder to find people to play with. And it really helps if you think about that.
I'm curious about that. Oh, I'm curious about that. Have you found that MR brings adoption faster? Is there any difference in VR in terms of, like, Demio in MR versus Demio in VR? Do you think it brings in different cohort of players? Or? Just curious.
I think for me personally, like, the biggest thing has been we've been out demoing on show floors for a really long time. It's been always a huge problem. You get somebody into your game and you completely lose the connection with the person you're talking to. And in MR, you still have that social connection. So that is a really great differentiator. I've heard, incidentally, like, people with Demio, for instance, really love playing it in person with other people. And we have, I think, about half of the people are playing in MR now versus playing it in VR.
So about half.
Yeah.
Oh, that's pretty significant considering the tools that we provide for MR haven't been out very long. But I will say we have put a tremendous amount of effort, good effort, into good engineering as best we can, and feedback. I know you and I had talked about this once. Getting feedback from developers, all of you here, especially you and I work very closely together on Crockett. But for anyone in the audience, I think getting feedback on what you want to do, how we can help. So from the design side, there's lots of examples as samples, showcases that we put out. And that from the indie perspective, that helps a lot, I think, to get started.
But don't you start really at just ground zero and say, what kind of developer are you? We all deal with this existential question, who am I? But it's sort of just pretty binary. Like, are you making games? Are you just passionate about tech? Are you an agency being hired to do things? Should people start even step back and ask themselves that first, and then who's the audience that they're making this for? That helps sort of send people in the right direction. Is that something that you standardly ask of those who are approaching
sometimes.
you? Or do you guys do the same thing? Like when you're starting a new project, especially Robin, you straddle enterprise and games. So I'm just curious, where do you literally start that decision-making process?
In that regard, I'd say, right?
Right. Both of our studios, like, we do some amount of work for hire projects, and some of it in the educational space, enterprise space, but then some of it's in the straight-up gaming space. And,
which is really fun because you get to, you get to flex all over the place. You get to help people. You get to do something in medical. You're like, oh, cool, I did this, but also I get to do this cool game.
I have a question for both of you in that regard. Do you ask the customer, like what we were talking about at breakfast this morning, do you ask the customer, like, does a customer come to you and say, I want a VR game made for? And then do you back up and say, well, wait a second, I'm not understanding why you would want a VR game or an AR game or an MR game. Do you go all the way down to the level of what is the problem they're trying to solve and who is their customer?
That's pretty much where
Before
it always
you
is.
develop anything?
I almost never get anyone that says exactly what they want. It's usually it's a bunch of PDFs.
Yeah, I'm with you. Like, so often folks come to you, they think they know what they want.
Yeah, right.
And then you start to ask them questions, and you start to realize that they don't want what they're asking for. And I remember hearing Fred Brooks talk about this a long time ago. He's an early VR pioneer. And he was so frustrated with clients who, like, didn't know what they wanted, and he would just grumble about it. And then it hit him one day. He's like, oh, if they knew what they wanted, they wouldn't need me.
There it is.
Right?
There it is.
And when you start thinking, oh, my job is to help them figure out what they actually want. Okay, that's my, okay, I'll do that. And so that is often so much. They think they know what they want. You figure out what they really want. And then you have to sell it back to them and convince them that, like, no, really, though, this is what's going to solve your problem.
That's what they asked for, yeah.
Right. And when you get that and you do that right, then, like, it works great, because then they realize, oh, okay, whoa, this really is going to solve the problem that I have. Yeah, because that can be really challenging, but that's part of the fun, I think, of working on those sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
Well, the
Like
expectations
part
of
my
if you're work for hire, whom you're working for, what they want. I'm going to spin it to a different side. I've just thought of this. In terms of working on intellectual property, original content, original ideas versus working on Angry Birds, working on Among Us. Is there a difference in how you would approach MR for an established IP and the expectations you think the audience has versus doing something original? Do you think there's any more openness or flexibility, or do you have more leeway because you're not having to meet consumers' expectations on an established IP? And does MR change that in any way, or does it not matter in your approach? Because you both worked on known IP, and you're working on D&D, which is exciting.
I think one thing that is potentially great with MR is that since you don't see the whole world, you don't have to build as much. Content is constantly a problem. Like 3D assets is expensive, so it doesn't really help with games like Demio, where you still have to make.
So you're not even thinking about the consumer. You're just like, it's cheaper, it's better, it's easier. No, I'm kidding. I'm totally kidding.
Yeah, but I mean, I think we're all looking for making good business, especially these days, right? So you have to think long and hard about where you spend your efforts, and I personally think a lot about the envelope. What is it that I'm presenting to my potential players? What are they thinking that this image and title is going to lead them to?
So if you give them more, if it's more of an immersive world, that leaves it more open to their possible criticism and expectations, where MR, you're just feeding them a little bit in a way. Is that another way to look at it, or
maybe.
Just curious?
Well, I mean, I guess I'd say that one of the big differences between VR and MR.
Yeah.
VR is so often about creating a place, and very often you're working with an IP. So many IPs are about places, right, and building that place.
Right.
When you're working in augmented reality or mixed reality, you're not building a place anymore. Now, this is going to be about characters, and it's going to be about objects. And that doesn't work with every IP.
Right.
So anytime you're working, adapting an IP into a new medium, you always have to look at it, and you have to find, like, okay, what is the essence of this medium, and how does it translate?
Right.
Like when we worked on Among Us VR, it wasn't an obvious slam dunk that, of course, Among Us should be in VR. We had to stop and think, because that's a little 2D multiplayer game. Why should that be in VR? And we looked at it and realized, okay, well, first of all, it is a game about a place, okay, and it's about a game where you can't see everything at once, okay, so that can kind of work in 3D.
Right.
But then it's a game about watching your back, right? And we realized, because it's in Among Us, it's all about, well, I'm doing my little spaceship task, but is there someone behind me? And we realized, like, oh my God, the turning around really matters, because people are sneaking up behind you, and realize this is a good match for VR. So you always have to look at that. With mixed reality, it's different, because, okay, now it's not about place and space. It's about characters and objects and people and furniture. And so you have to figure out, like, how is that going to work? And so my opinion is, I think a lot of the early mixed reality hits are going to be probably not involve brands right in the beginning. I think it's going to be people figuring out, how can I bring these interesting things into my real world? Because that's so much of the power of it, to be able to have virtual objects that are in my house, in my home, on my furniture, like that, and it's just a very different way of interacting.
Yeah, I mean, Meta is leaning in. We work with them, and they say, all right, well, have you thought about an MR mode. We have a title called Behemoth coming out October, November. And we're like, it's about Dark Ages and grappling and flying and taking down big bosses. Don't think there's an MR mode in there, but then I look at The Walking Dead. I'm like, that would be cool to have zombies walking out of the walls and stuff. And even though it was set in New Orleans and we wanted to be brought back to this weird apocalyptic time, I can see an element there, and that's a big IP, so it could work there. But to your point, not everything does.
We just did it in our Silent Slayer VR, which is a game all about you're trying to kill vampires. You have to break into their coffin, but like if you make one noise, they burst out and get you.
That's cool.
And so in the VR mode, you're in a spooky castle and you're doing this surrounded by this really cool environment. But we also made an MR mode where now the coffin is like in your house. Ooh. And that's kind of fun. And one of the nice things about it is the streamability of this, the ability to have virtual objects in the place and the space is a really fun way to interact with things. So there are some things I think that can work in VR and in MR, but then there are other things that really want to be in one or the other.
Got it. So,
and the border is a little bit like it's not a clear, right? You can have a portal is a really cool object in mixed reality. With the type of headsets we're seeing now with MetaQuest 3, you have the pass-through. It's a fantastic toy to play with.
With recent improvements, I might add, in the latest version. Commercial break.
So it's like if you want to connect people who are in different living rooms, you can do that with a kind of a virtual world portal into their living room. And that's a really cool...
But I'm kind of curious, since you both have worked with known IP, whether your own or someone else's, do you have a sense of MR giving you opportunities to think of new ways of interacting with the space and using the constraints that are there in both our software and our hardware? Do you feel there's opportunities there that we just haven't, that none of us have explored yet?
Oh, I mean, there
wide
are,
open space.
There are so many tremendous opportunities in the MR space that people have only begun to think about. We were able to show at GDC a little bit of research we've been doing with multiplayer gaming that spans multiple homes, right? So I'm in my house, running around my living room, and then we erase one of my walls, and now I'm looking at a virtual version of your house and your living room, and then we can throw objects back and forth between our two rooms. And when we'd figured this out, it was like, this is really interesting. This is a play pattern that no one's ever had before, to be able to take our homes and join our homes together and have that kind of intimacy. It's not possible with any other technology. And I think we're just at the beginning of this, because particularly what's coming next, surely, I mean, I don't know. Is Meta going to do it? Is Apple going to do it? Right now, most of these things are all about one room at a time. There's an expectation you're going to stay in your one room.
Yeah.
But why would we stick with that? So one of my big predictions is we're going to start to see a new genre of MR games, particularly when you bring AI into it, which I think of these as sort of improvisational MR storytelling games in your home, right? Adaptive in-home storytelling, I sometimes call it, where you can move around your whole house and you have AI characters that go in with you, right? And like you hear a knock at your actual door. And okay, you got your headset on. Okay, you go to your actual door. You actually open your door. Oh, there's a virtual character outside who's like, hey, I got these groceries. Let's go to your kitchen. Okay, you close the door. They go to the kitchen. We got to start cooking this stuff. So okay, so you're cooking virtual groceries, but you're now going to prepare them, put them in your real oven. And the character's like, cool, we have to make this stuff because we need to make baits, because up in your attic, there are monsters, and you and I are going to go up there, and we're going to go do this, right?
Keep going.
Right? And so the opportunities for using your entire home as a video game platform are completely unexplored, and then of course taking it outside, completely unexplored. All of these things are just a few years away. Like, it's all coming. So.
And we talked before about the gold mines. Where are the gold mines in this? And I really like that. I think, especially with MR now, there is still a lot of gold mines in VR, obviously. Like that's there's an audience there. They like to pay for playing games, and now we have this additional thing that is also coming that is opening up a lot of very, very interesting opportunities.
Well, I had a quota to hit. I'm supposed to bring up AI at least twice on a panel. You brought it up once. Can you speak to what you're doing with AI at all? Are you implementing
yeah.
it? Yeah.
Yeah.
We only have 29 minutes. So
I'm right there with this one over here. Like we actually talked about 2 years ago, I think, we both described what was Grocket and what we were showing at GDC. That was pretty funny to see how that came around and how it was slightly different. In AI, yeah, absolutely. And I have some IP ideas where we could license things that would be appropriate, but sometimes I worry about things like the legal ramifications of scaring somebody in their own home.
Oh, right.
Or, creating that sort of atmosphere. And, for as much as I'm pro doing all these things, we also don't want to get sued or have people get hurt.
Or a game that encourages you to run down a flight of stairs.
Right.
There's a lot. There's a lot to look at here.
Yeah.
It's we're,
and that's a feedback loop, right? So if we had the ability, we had the ability to know that. We had the ability to scan more of the home and say, oh, well, these are stairs. So when you get close to this, tell us this. We would know to tell you, oh, don't do that.
Yeah.
So what you're basically saying is you're giving me some feedback. Like I said, developer feedback is really important. That maybe best practices and explaining the constraints and explaining safety, accessibility, all of that is important.
Right.
And ethical game design then comes into that as well.
Yeah, because we all know this is changing. Like I remember, it wasn't that long ago, remember Oculus making it very clear that all games must be seated. You need to be playing seated, and the reason was the lawyers are like, I don't want someone tripping over their coffee table. And that didn't last because that's okay. Gradually, we have to figure out how can we make this stuff safe. And it's something we'll all be figuring out together. It's,
We're all moving forward together and in different ways and embracing new technology as best we can.
Yeah.
We do it.
with all due respect to Meta and your glorious headsets, and Palmer was there before, thanks to him, some of you are also developing for Apple. How do you approach scaling what you're doing or considering that headset from a technology standpoint? How difficult is it to think about MR for Quest headsets and then consider what you're doing for Apple? What are the differences that you can speak to and the opportunities?
Well, first of all, I think it's fantastic that Apple has joined this industry. I think it opens up for a lot of consumers who wouldn't consider other hardware because they're really big fans of what Apple is doing, and they're so good at both hardware and software and packaging and marketing.
Wasn't there an announcement today that they're like thinking about AVP2, but they're going to do something more approachable? Did I lower cost? Thank you. I know I read something in a headline. So yeah, I'm glad they're still doing something and making it even more approachable.
I think from a developer point of view, it's a big change that there is no controllers. A lot of the games are built with controllers in mind. Our game Racket Club really takes advantage of like being able to do top spins on the balls, or sub-millimeter precision of the controller that needs to be there that you couldn't do today with pure hand tracking.
Right.
Will hand tracking get there? Probably, eventually. But hand tracking is fantastic for being much more intuitive, and we talked about that before, right? The fact that you can just anyone can lean in and grab something and manipulate it the way you could.
Yeah, it seems hand tracking is one big point of differentiation. Anything else in your development?
I mean, I'll underline the hand tracking.
Yeah.
It's real interesting to think about where this is going to go. There's a lot of people who act like, oh, controllers are temporary. Soon it'll all just be empty hands. But empty hands has a lot of weaknesses. Not having a fire button, like it's empty hands has challenges because that lack of tactile feedback. But the empty hands has incredible affordances as well, particularly for casual experiences. So my guess is we're going to see long term. We're going to see some of both. I think we're going to see more casual games that work with an empty hand mode, but then I think people who are playing more serious games, I think the controllers and the precision that they're going to afford. I think we're going to see both of those. So that's there. The huge opportunity on the Apple Vision Pro is the eye tracking, that's new. That's the biggest innovation there, which creates sort of new ways to interact with things. At the same time, it creates some design challenges because there's sort of support for indirect control, where you're like looking at something and interacting it from a distance, but then you can also reach out and grab and touch it. So then you kind of have to decide, like, when am I pushing a button and when am I pushing a button? These are things everyone's trying to figure out.
Right.
So there's challenges there, but it's interesting. And I definitely think at this time, the different systems are so different that trying to make something that's just going to work across everything, right now is not the time for that. Right now is the time to like lean in and like, what does each of the platforms do well, and create experiences that really embraces the strengths of each platform.
So Robin, I think did you recently do a hackathon where you did something for, was it hospitals or was it retail?
We've done a couple of hackathons. We've done the Invera hackathon, which is medical. Bob Fine, I don't know if he's actually here. He's got a great pavilion. And in that one, we gave all the students who came our systems broke at core, top 2-1. So that's great. And then shortly thereafter, we popped up to New York with Rita, and we did a hackathon there.
Yeah, Home Helper was your app.
Yeah, the Home Care Helper.
Home Care, that's the one I was thinking
It won the
about.
Enterprise Prize,
Yeah,
the non-gaming prize.
Yeah. That was a fun one because it was thoughts that we had before about position, location, and what you could do like more spatially around everything to be able to guide people through different tasks. Because this is the big problem everyone has. Like, oh, I got to have the dog walker come by or feed my cat. And you tell them 3 more times on the phone where stuff is. Why are we doing this?
Or you write a note and then they lose the note. Or like me with the cat sitter, you put it to the fridge.
Oh,
they never look.
I wasn't listening when you told me the important stuff. Where are those treats again?
Yeah. No, that was a compelling app.
So I worked at Niantic, and I'm repeating beautiful things that I don't quite understand. In what you're doing for sort of the enterprise or home healthcare and things like that, are you using VPS, like anchoring the assets to specific things, so when people are going in to feed the cat, they know exactly where the cat food is, versus just having an AR asset sort of floating and looking for a surface or something?
Placing, so you would go through and you would place down the anchor, say, this is where this is, here's the instructions for that. Ultimately, of course, we would have either, you would say it, and we'd give you the translation, of course, because that's quite easy, and then possibly even animate your character, because why not? Like, why not go all the way with that and like get that personalization, but be able to have you place all of this in the home and have you recall it all.
Yeah.
And then of course, we'd have that link go up to our Reality Link system, pop down your mobile app, be like, look, they actually did this. Okay, I can get back to my vacation. Where's the beach?
It feels like MR, from that approachability standpoint, can work for home healthcare workers, wherever they sit in the tiers. And then I didn't know that you worked on a firefighting experience years and years ago, because I'd worked at HTC, and we did a fully immersive training for firemen, and it was amazing. And we had a real fire hose, and we demoed it at, I think it was CES, and it was amazing. But I think about it, if that had been done in MR, imagine just like a real fire coming out of your oven, or a real fire coming out of the doors, or things like that. So I'm just so excited about MR broadening the headset usage because of all these new applications that can. We worked with bank tellers and learning how to literally teach folks how to type in the right keys and open the doors and give out money and things of that nature. So that fidelity possibly of the hand tracking may not need it as much, but they're just basic gestures.
I really think VR has struggled to break into the world of education, partly because of when you immerse yourself in the world, suddenly you're cut off from everyone else around you, which is a little weird in a traditional educational setting.
Right.
However, in an educational setting, you put on an MR headset, And now you're still in here with the other students and with the instructors, and the ability to have a classroom where, okay, everybody, we're going to put on the headsets now, and now we're going to interact with this virtual thing that we can all see. We can hand it around. We can all manipulate it.
We could all stand inside the volcano together as it blows up and go check it out.
Yeah, all these things, I mean, certainly for any kind of training that involves danger, but anything that's complicated, just like the whole idea of biology, for a biology teacher to be able to say, okay, let's take a look at this cell, let's open it up and look at the different parts, and then everybody's handing it around, manipulating it, working together on because you were talking about the co-located MR. Like one of my shorthand, people say, well, how do I make MR really good? It's like, I always say people and furniture, right? And the co-located, we both have a headset on, and we can both manipulate and hand around or throw back and forth these virtual objects.
You just made me think about when I was in biology class in high school and having a periodic table, and instead of having the dangerous, but I don't know why they give children the right, to blow up labs, but imagine if we all had access to virtual Bunsen burners and putting the elements together, and
Right.
we had a lot of accidents.
I think what you're saying, though, what I'm hearing
you can
is
make
that
mistakes. That's the important
doing
thing.
it together.
You can actually make that mistake. You know you want to blow that up. You know you want to do what the teacher said not to do. Do it.
Yeah.
Fun.
Learn from your mistakes.
learning socially.
The social possibilities of the mixed reality are I think that's what's really going to ultimately sell it in the long run. The fact that we can all now together be interacting with a three-dimensional thing in a place, in a space, is just.
So I'm going to ask the question. We don't know. We can't tell the future, but what do we think? What do we think the killer app will be for mixed reality? Who wants to start with that one? Because I think it's enterprise. I think it's education. Again, I work in games, but I sort of want it to be in education or enterprise. What do you think?
One of the things that drew me a lot to this technology is the fact that you have a camera that sees what you see. And if that camera can be properly contextual aware of what you're doing, it could really augment you. And that's kind of what I thought this was going to be about more when I thought about this 10 years ago. I think we're hopefully going there. Right now, there's a lot of, as a developer, you don't get access to the camera feed because the platforms would say, it's a privacy issue. You're not, don't do that. You can do some nice content here, but we're going to take care of this for you so our users are safe. But I hope that that's going to open up, that it would be a permission, so we could do some really
Rita, do you know
interesting.
Can you make that happen?
Get a notepad over here.
Yeah, she's going to go back.
No pressure.
Take
No
care
pressure whatsoever.
No comment.
Flip the switch.
But I hear you, and I think it's interesting that the more features are available to you to work with from the hardware and software perspective, obviously the more ingenuity and originality you could bring to the applications that you are developing.
I see so much, though, but what are you, without saying a specific app or developer, what do you...
Killer app-wise?
Yeah.
I do not have a crystal ball, but...
None of us have a crystal ball, but we have a lot of experience. There are a lot of people in the audience who...
I see beautiful apps every day, every week. I would say leaning into MR, taking advantage of everything that you could see and touch in the room or the space.
She's not giving an answer. She didn't answer the question.
I'm not. I will. There's some beautiful apps. Like on the show floor, I would say go see Pencil, which also came out of the hackathon that you were at, because again, it relies on MR to access the paper, the pencil that you're learning, that you're being trained to color on or draw on. I'm in love with an app called Eggscape, and Federico's here in the audience, which is coming out, I don't know when, or later this year or next year, which is an amazing gameplay experience that only seems to work in MR. There's Coastermania, which I also love, which works really well in MR. There's so many wonderful apps.
All right, then I'm going to change the question. So
killer apps, though.
What's inspiring? Where do you think can lead to a killer app? Yes, I want to hear where you guys think.
I think the killer apps is purely instructional. It's turning us all into superhumans and knowing what to do in any given contextual moment. Okay. I don't know how to fix the washer. What do I do? Okay, I could call the service technician. He just pops in. Boom. Oh, what's the problem you're having? Okay, well, the panel's over there. You got to do this, this, this. okay, I'll just follow what you say. It's very Star Trek. It's very much the, like, I'll just push the button, learn it right now, or Matrix, I learn it right now. I don't need to learn it forever. I just need to learn it right now.
And Jesse, what do you think the...
I think a meaningful killer app for MR that people aren't largely thinking about is going to be games for children. Because children interact with the world physically and imaginatively. And that's why they can't sit still at school, because that's how they learn, that's how they interact. They want to be physical. And MR is all about physical spaces and imagination, right? If I made an app today that was all about playing kickball with Pikachu, you could go outside and play kickball with Pikachu. Every adult in this room would be like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not interested in that. That's weird, running around outside. You know, no, it's weird.
Yeah.
But kids will be all over this. I mean, we're already seeing. I mean, the #1 app, you know, most played app in the Meta Quest is Gorilla Tag.
Yep.
And you know, who's playing that? 35-year-olds? No. Like we see it slants very young. We see it with Among Us VR that the younger players are really passionate about this, and you look again. What's so successful about Gorilla Tag? It's so physical. It's so physical.
That's right.
Now you can be physical, but be up and about and moving around. And the game industry largely disregards the interests of children, which is weird, but it's true. I mean, you look at the attitude that people have about Roblox. They act like, oh, well, that's not real gaming. That's this weird thing that kids do. We're focused on real gaming. But Roblox is this absolute titan and a huge force in just the overall changing of the game industry, because it's what younger players and kids care about. And we're already seeing that, you know, these kids are the ones who play the most. And when it becomes their habit, they play every day. And these kids are going to grow up and get older. They're going to be the vanguard of the future users here. So I think one of the biggest opportunities is to think about what's going to work and be interesting for these younger players. So in the short term, that would be my focus.
So the kids will make the killer MR app.
I mean, I know Palmer said it before. He's like, you know, it's the young kids, you know, right? There's no filter, there's no fear, right? Go out there and ask questions, talk to people in the industry, but we are a wiser group up here. I think there's a lot to be learned from the perspectives of everybody on this panel, and I hope you heard me in the beginning. I hope you have some questions, because we can talk about a lot of things. I'm glad you're just sort of flying the wall listening. But I would love it if, I can barely see with the lights, but if any of you have questions, we would love to entertain some. Oh, hello, young man.
Hey,
I know
Jenna.
you.
Is this working?
Is it working? Is it on?
Hello,
Is it on?
hello. There we go. Hey, Jenna.
Hello, Mac. What's up?
Funny you say that, Jesse. My company, Lucky Juice Box, is working on the Roblox for Real World Spaces, so we totally agree with what you're saying. And I just want to say that I think Expect You to Die is like the best VR game out there, so
I think.
kudos to you. And then, Tommy, I also want to mention that I think Akron is one of the most underrated XR games of all time. And one of my questions just to the broader group is, when we go from VR to MR, we're kind of having to resell the headsets all over again. You know, Rita's probably thinking about Quest 2 to Quest 3, right? And you did something really interesting with phones connecting into the headsets. So what do you think about onboarding the next generation of people to MR, especially when a lot of people have probably been turned off by VR due to things like cyber sickness or the type of games?
Did you hear that? Not really. Mac,
Yeah, it's-
did you hear?
Should I say it closer?
No, the mic, we heard most of that. Can you just repeat the
Yeah,
final
just
part
what
of
do
that?
you think about the onboarding, especially when we think about multiple devices of getting people to the next type of MR games?
Yeah, we talked about that a little bit this morning on breakfast, which is a lot of it is, it always helps to demo, right? And you have someone there with you, but then how do you market, you know, without talking about the terms MR, VR? You just want to bring people in for great experiences and content, but how do you get them into the experience better?
You need to make stuff people fall in love with. You know, you'd mentioned our I Expect You to Die game, which we've been thrilled. I mean, we came out with that, 2015? It's 9 years later. The thing still sells really well. And one of our goals when we made that is we thought, we want to make the game that when you show VR to your mom, you want this to be the game because it's going to be accessible and understandable and invite people in. And that's the key. I mean, I think that's the key
That's
for
one
onboarding.
key. What about community, right? We've seen a lot of like influencers pick up things off the shelf that you thought, right? We talked about this too, which was, hey, I started making something, then an influencer picked it up years later, and I moved over here to start working on something else. Like maybe it's building community. You know, again, you can't manufacture virality. You know, it's hard to do that too. But I think a lot of the titles that are getting people in starts with sort of that groundswell from that type
You
of
have to
group.
build a community, and there's many ways of getting that started. But for sure, most games I know and game developers use Discord. Like a game will have its own Twitter X channel, it'll have its own Discord, they'll promote it on Reddit, they'll put clips on YouTube. You just kind of got to get it all out there.
I actually also think that AI will be really great at understanding what the user is not understanding and being able to explain that in natural language to them. And that's probably doable already now. So that, I think, will help a lot of people into gaming. I think the gaming community is still rather small. It's mostly people who want something that is very difficult. It's a little bit engineering in their mindset. They want to try new things. And there's a lot of people, most people are outside of that group and feel it's not for them. They failed the first time they tried, and now they feel a little bit stupid.
But gaming, we have an audience here, right? We have those tools of Discord and other things. You know, there are lifestyle experiences. There's crocheting, right? There's piano vision. There's all these other things. I feel it also is we need more content. We need more diverse content. So if I come in for crocheting app, well, why am I going to stay? So I feel like you need to make the headset practical, a little utilitarian, as well as fun. I feel like you need a broader portfolio of stuff. So once you're in there, you're like, oh, now this device, I can use it to replace something I used to do. I mean, there's so many things we have to software, you know. We spent hours talking about that back in the day, too.
Thanks, y'all.
Hi there. My name is Ashley. I'm an undergraduate student at UNC Chapel Hill. I do graphics and XR research there, and I also run the XR student org at UNC and an intercollegiate XR student org. I'm really passionate about multisensory XR, and I actually first think I became interested in computer graphics when I used to play some massive multiplayer online games that were developed by Schell Games in partnership with, I think, Disney Toon Studios. Like Pixie Hollow was like the first thing that piqued my interest in terms of wanting to combine my passions for like visual design and like rendering technology and just how to immerse someone in a virtual world. And I really resonated when you talked about how a crucial focus of future MR apps will be on children interacting and having their imagination heightened because they feel like they can actually move around and be in the world, like in a place, in a space with all the IP that they really love, right? I'm curious because I'm really interested in computer graphics, but also more recently I've become interested in future interfaces that also allow you to like smell in VR, taste in VR. How do you think future interfaces like olfactory displays, things like that, will change how people make apps for children or people in their 20s, 30s, older people? Yeah.
That's a super great question.
It's a great question. Can you speak to audio?
We've had this conversation.
I know, but like
before.
Robin,
Yeah,
but people don't realize, Robin, you're also the audio lead for, and I think audio
Well,
and
you were also
smell.
asking about smell. as
Smell,
well,
but
right?
audio,
So
but
like,
other
the
multi-sensory
additional
experiences,
sensory
right?
thing, so from an audio standpoint, spatialized audio is where it's at, and that's fundamentally different from 3D audio. 3D audio tells me the location. I know you're over there, but spatialized uses the head-related transfer function. So that's a modeling technique of the sound happened, and where did it hit my ears? Oh, okay, your head's turned. Now I know your head's turned, so it hits like this. And you know that at this like super crazy level in the back of your brain somewhere, and you could tell the difference dramatically, whether your head's like this or like this. That's really great. When we were talking about smell, there's several companies that do that already, and you were talking about Disney.
Yeah.
smell
Yeah.
and location-based and things of that nature,
Olfactory,
right?
olfactory is
Huge.
hard. It's one of these things sounds like a good idea, but in practice, it's really, really hard because you can't simulate it. The only way to do it is to put those molecules up your nose, and they have to be the actual molecules, and so it's really hard to do, and then there's a lot of problems with it. So personally, I don't think those are going to be very near term. I think there's going to be a lot more power in tactility way before then. And I think that's one of the things mixed reality is going to make possible. It's something people haven't thought through yet. Because right now, most mixed reality apps, you float stuff in the air. The new ones, what's becoming possible, what the headsets are making possible, is now I can anchor things in my place in my space and on people, okay? But what I can't do yet is to anchor virtual things on objects, right?
Yeah.
So I
Put
don't
it on
know.
this cup.
Right.
And then
right.
move this thing.
Yeah. So like
It's huge.
I take the physical bottle and then I take off the physical cap. And then, whoa, the virtual
Right.
genie comes out of it. We can't do that yet because we're not good enough at tracking the objects. But we're going to be, because AI is super good at figuring that stuff out. And as soon as that starts to happen, there's going to be this whole crossover between the toy world and the video game world, where you're going to have physical objects that have virtual components. And so when I think about, like, what's the next step in this space, it's that tactility of not just, oh, my controller buzzed, but no, there's going to be hundreds of objects that I'm going to use and manipulate. Manipulating real physical objects is going to be part of playing video games. That's, I think, is the near term.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Great question. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great. Couple more minutes, more questions?
Yeah, I have a question, and I want to ask Meta a question. I want to ask Jesse a question, and other people can pitch in as well. So I studied entrepreneurship, and one of the things that we always got was this nice curve where you have the early adopters, or the innovators, the early adopters, the late adopters, and then the laggards.
Right.
I am a 90s kid. I had my own 386 and 486 PC when I was like 8. So I've been able to see computers before internet, computers after internet. I've seen the first MMOs really come into existence. And so I've seen a lot of paradigm shifts happen. I'm 37, close to 37 right now. I've seen a lot of paradigm shifts happen over the course of my life. And I kind of want to burst a little bit of the bubble. I really feel like we are now in a time where, because we can do mixed reality, we're going extremely deep, figuring out, hey, we're going to be able to do this, and we're going to be able to do that in the house, and that's all true. But is it possible that when you look at this adoption curve, that we are now really focusing on getting this next influx of people that we want to have in VR, the late adopters, and so we're like, we're going to make everything accessible. We're going to make the house open for you. We're going to make this as easy as possible. But if you look at what Palmer said, the first 50,000 people that got that VR headset, they had a very specific goal for VR. They wanted to have their, matrixy game experience. I personally wonder if there's not going to be an infusion of other people already in the games industry wanting to do VR that are right now waiting because they don't think that VR, hardware and software-wise, is where it needs to be for them to truly get the experiences that they would want to have most. And my question is, is it possible that we should not just be focusing on just mainstream audience, and can we also get back to some of the hardcore gamers that made this technology get here to begin with? Because that's kind of a group that I used to represent.
So let me see if I can understand.
Yeah, go ahead.
So you're saying go back to what the early adopters came into VR for?
No, what I'm saying is...
Focus on hardcore gamers.
Focus.
So I think
so go back to focusing on
what I'm
hardcore.
suggesting is that I think somewhere between 3 to 5 years down the line, there's going to be a new infusion of gamers that are already excited, hardcore gamers, that want to get into VR, that are waiting for the time to be right. And I think right now we're in this stage where we're really focused on the late adopters.
Right.
But there's a lot of early adopters and innovators that want to
Yes.
get in the space, and they're like, it's not there yet. And they see you coming up with all of this cute stuff that's super accessible, but they're like, we'll wait for a few more years. I'm wondering if we've forgotten about that segment.
No, we haven't. And that's actually a really great question, but I can't speak in detail to it. But we have started to segment the players or the users of the headsets. So there's core gamers, there's enthusiast gamers, talking about crochet before, there's like lifestyle folks, and then there's those that just want to consume media. To be honest with you, shooters, hardcore stuff, it still sells really well. It does sell well. We do care for and nurture those developers. We don't turn away apps and games that only appeal to certain core gamers. I do see your point of view is that we have widened our scope to look at consumers in general. And so just mentioning those 4 quadrants, if you will, of genres in a way, and core gamers are a big part of that. Whether or not they decide to come back and develop for Quest or not, that's a question I really don't know. I do see some amazing games coming. There are some great games on the platform. I don't know, one that I'm working, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I got 3 words for you. Asgard's Wrath 2.
Okay,
Right?
well,
10 out of 10 from IGN.
that's a great point, but,
right?
yeah, it's a great point, but, and I say but, because there's so much room, to your point, for more hardcore games. And I don't know if you play Steam games, but my family does. We still do. And I'm not going to name names, but there's some titles on Steam that are fantastic hardcore games that are not on our platform. That I, as part of my program of working with developers, even if they're not quite indies, but somewhat established, I will reach out to them and then communicate back within the company and say, hey, this game is rocking it on Steam. It's a hardcore shooter or whatever. I mean, let's talk about it. And we do have that conversation. And it has not been deprioritized. But there's just so much content that we do need to nurture to grow the ecosystem. And MR is a part of it, but it's not all of it. So I do appreciate the feedback, by the way.
It's just about widening the perspective. I think that, but
I mean,
it's great to
just,
hear that
it's
that's
just
there.
dramatically underfunded too. We started off making more hardcore games, and you can't make the sales. So what are you supposed to do, right? So that's when you decide, like, oh, we need a bigger ramp here. We're going to need to like bring more people along to make this work, so that everybody gets in on this. And then while that's happening, right now, Asgard's Wrath, I love Asgard's Wrath. It's also work. You put that headset on, you're not really relaxed because you're like doing all this stuff. You're standing there buying all these potions and everything. You're like, wow, this is actually like work. I think I'm tired. And you can't stay in the headset long enough to really really play the game for like 4 hours when you're playing something really cool. That's just technology. We need a little more time for that. While that happens, it's all push and pull. So we're just bringing more players in, more headset, more funding, all the things. Eventually we'll get there.
Yeah, the other thing is performance. I mean, it's not simple to port a fantastic graphics-intense, performance-intense PC VR game to Quest. It's becoming more possible, and we have found ways around. I found a few games on Steam that are now on Quest that were redone, reworked, so to speak, and ported to Quest 2. Yeah. But in future iterations of the hardware, hopefully it'll get even better.
That's where that eye tracking and foveated rendering will
well
come in
over
handy.
time, and I
Thank you.
I thank you for that last question, because I mean it just shows that it's an iterative process. We got to keep listening to the audience, seeing where the market goes, and trying to just get more people in the headset, and then hopefully we do. Right. I make core games. I want to stay. I need there to be an audience. I'm good at shooting things. I like it. But I can't thank all of you enough for sticking with us throughout this long, wonderful day. I can't thank you enough for letting me join all of you. Thank you, and have a wonderful evening and the rest of the show, and enjoy the Augie Awards tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.